Hey there, fellow tamers and Digidestin. It's Mike, aka Sinaku from Overground, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing on with our Rainbow series, and we're moving on to the color red. So for those unfamiliar, in this series we build one deck out of every color every time a new set releases. This could be something along to do with our favorite archetype, our favorite characters, or just our favorite strategies in general. And we're kind of on a bit of a savers kick. So on our first episode of the Rainbow series, we talked about blue Digimon. That was kind of the focus of the blue color. And in red, we're going to be talking about Red ShineGreymon, and we're going to put the focus on Marcus. So last episode was Thomas, now we're on Marcus. The green deck unfortunately has one copy of Yoshino in it, but I'm going to tell you it's not a Yoshino based deck. So we're not going to do the entire Savers cast, but we are going to do as much as we can given what we enjoy and what we actually have available to us in terms of card pool. But yeah, so you've heard me drone on this channel about Yellow ShineGreymon. It's one of my favorite decks. It's one of my favorite Digimon. So as much as I wanted to build a upgraded ShineGreymon list for BT4, which I have, it's not a deck I want to cover on the channel just yet because it is something that we've talked about at length, and I wanted to just kind of take a break and talk about something a little bit different. So instead, we're going to talk about the Red ShineGreymon, which is a new card out of BT4. So we'll kind of go through the deck list here and talk about how he kind of fits into the overall narrative of the deck, and just kind of talk about how this is a cool, neat, little fun deck that actually might see some competitive viability based on just how the meta is going to be shifting right now. This deck is really fast, it's very powerful, and it hits like a truck. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Our 5 eggs here, we got 4 Digimon and 1 Koromon. Now, I did talk about how in previous videos right now that in this format we're going to be kind of focusing on sitting in the raising area but building up our stacks. And while that is true, we do play a few Digiburst cards in this deck, which is why I didn't want to max out on Koromon, because sometimes there might be opportunities where you want to actually detach the Koromon as the best Digiburst target. So with that in mind, we're not generally, or if you detach anything else, you're still not going to have the 4 sources for Koromon to proc, whereas if you were to detach anything and keep Digimon on board, there's more opportunities for Digimon to be live. And DP gain is kind of the name of the game in this deck specifically, because we want to make our ShineGreymon as big as humanly possible, because he's going to be hitting for security attack plus 1,000,000. This is basically like the old kind of one-punch Ragna strategy, but kind of trimmed down, because we no longer need that extra level 7 option, because we can actually do it in ShineGreymon proper. So the highest number of DP that we can give him, the more likelihood he will have to be surviving any security checks, which means he can just keep plowing through our opponent's security and just clearing them out for one final attack. And that's kind of what this is. It's just, it builds up to one kind of giant big OTK, and if our opponent isn't careful, we can actually get a lot of security checks, just kind of sneak them in with a lot of different variety of Digimon in this deck, which we'll get to talking to as we go. So then we move on to our rookies. So we're playing 4 copies of the Box Topper Agumon and 4 copies of the Starter Deck Agumon. Again, we just want to give our Digimon as many DP buffs as possible, and the promo Agumon is really good because our top end all contains the name Greymon. So if we can actually finish an entire stack with this Agumon in it, they're always going to get plus 2,000 by default. The Agumon here is just a secondary option in case we don't have access to this one at the time, just to give any Digimon plus 1,000. Then we're playing 4 copies of Flamon. This is the red equivalent of Strabimon, where it does the hybrid engine shenanigans, where we on play we get to reveal the top 3. We get to add any Digimon with hybrid in its form, as well as 1 red tamer this time. And we are playing the hybrid engine here because, again, it adds a level of consistency to red that kind of increases their playability, similar to what did with blue as well, because it gives us more opportunity to search our specific levels to help us build up our chain. And finally, we're rounding off our rookie lineup with 2 copies of Agumon Expert. Like I said, these Agumons are very integral to the end of the strategy, and so having multiple copies of them or accessibility to them is really strong. So if we need to use this Agumon early and we can't end our stack on a Greymon and we have to destroy it early and it just goes to trash and we get no value out of it, Agumon Expert helps us add a Agumon from our trash pile back to our hand. Let's just grab this boy and we're back off to the races. So we just have kind of an infinite supply of Agumons, which is really cool. So we're going to move on to our champion lineup. So we're maxing out 4 copies of Agunimon. This is to increase the consistency of hitting it off of Flamon, but also to just get it in our hand in general, because it's a good finisher similar to Lobomon, because it's something we can just slap on one of our red tamers and get 1 free extra swing in. 3 copies of the Greymon. This is from the starter deck that gives extra security attack plus 1. This is important because we're building a deck based on hitting multiple security checks, and just having an additional option to add one more security check helps us close out the games a little bit faster and gives us extra additional redundancy to increase our total consistency. 3 copies of Digimon, again, just to help give us more protection in the face of very rush-style decks, and then 2 copies of Dark Tyrannomon to give us some extra speed in our evolution paths if necessary. Moving on to our ultimates, we got a couple new cards here from BT4. So we got 3 copies of the Red ShineGreymon, similar to its yellow counterpart. So the yellow ShineGreymon originally was on Digivolve. You got to play a yellow tamer from your hand for free. In this case with ShineGreymon, you don't have to evolve it in the battle area specifically to trigger it because it has a Digiburst ability. So his effect is that you can Digiburst 2 to just play a tamer from your hand for free, 4-cost tamer or less specifically, but none of the tamers we play cost any more than that, so that's fine. So he just helps us accelerate the tamers that we search from our Flamons or that we naturally draw into without necessarily having to pay their on-play costs. It helps us get more tamers into play a lot faster. And the more red tamers we have in play kind of reaches the final end goal, which is the Red ShineGreymon. And what's cool about his other inheritable effect as well is that when attacking, if we have any tamer in play, which we will by using his effect, we can reduce any Digimon on the board by 2,000. So we could potentially snipe smaller Digimon. We could potentially snipe Digimon that are currently tapped so that we can run them over. And that's just very, very powerful. Moving on, we've got 2 copies of Groundramon, just a quick 2-cost evolution if necessary, and 5 to hard play if we need to take that route as well. And another new card from BT4, which is Volcdramon. And this shares the same inheritable as the Greymon, where it just gives the Digimon that evolves on top of it another security attack +1. And that's what we want. We just want security attack +1 in this deck, bar none, all the time. Speaking of security attack +1, let's talk about Aldamon. So Aldamon is the ultimate hybrid that we can search off of our Flamon package, and it is a level 5 that costs 3 to evolve, which is generally the case for the majority of them, and it has security attack +1 to start. But that's not where the fun ends, because if we have a hybrid or a red tamer in its Digivolution sources, it gets +4,000. So that means that it's already going to be 11,000 with the hybrid with security attack +1. You put that on top of a Greymon, for example, and it has like a Flamon as a rookie, you've satisfied both the requirements, and now you're swinging for security attack +2 for 11,000 on a level 5 Digimon. So you haven't even maxed out to the end of your rope, and you can actually take out a significant amount of damage from your opponent. So similarly to the old like secret metal Greymon, you don't have to pay 5 to get this much power, and the potential, you don't really care if it dies early game because you're just trying to shred as much security away from your opponent as possible. So it gives you a very strong attacker in the early game that you can kind of throw to the sacrificial lamb if necessary, because it will go back to 7,000 on your opponent's turn. But it's a very powerful card not to ignore, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because it's very powerful in its own right. But if we ever need to evolve over it, that's fine, because our megas are also equally just as powerful. And talking about our megas, here they are. So we've got 4 copies of the new Red ShineGreymon from BT4, and then ShineGreymon reads that our turn, anytime one of our red or yellow tamers gets suspended, we gain security attack +1 for this Digimon specifically. So let's talk about the tamers that we have in front of us real quick before we move on to the rest of the deck. So we're playing 3 copies of the new Marcus Diamond from BT4, and this is another one of our tamers where it sets us to 3 if our memory is 3 or less. So we kind of get to replace the old red tie. And his effect is that if one of our Digimon with Greymon in its name attacks, we can actually suspend Marcus and gain 1 memory. So this is really cool, because when we declare attack with Shine, we can suspend Marcus, gain a memory, and then give our ShineGreymon an additional security attack +1. Then we're also playing 2 copies of Sora. This is Sora from BT2 from our 1.0 set. I never thought I'd actually put this in a sleeve, but here we are. And Sora reads that when one of our Digimon attacks a player, so it means their security, we can suspend her to give that Digimon +2,000. So you see here with this Agumon, it automatically goes to 13,000. If we tap Sora, we go to 15,000. 14,000 seems to be the major cap out of this format, with most decks having Chaosmon as their major top end. So this means we can get through that without any issues. And again, we've suspended a Sora, so that means that our ShineGreymon will get an additional security attack +1. So if we have 1 Marcus and 1 Sora, we attack, we tap both of them. Now we have security attack +2 at potentially 15,000, depending on how we've built up the rest of our stack. And we can get additional security stacks if either Greymon, or security attacks rather, if either Greymon or Volcdramon are underneath. So you can kind of see how everything comes together for one kind of giant swing to just kind of decimate your opponent's security, which is really, really, really powerful. And then we're playing 2 copies of Blitz Greymon, and this is to help us out Digimon that Red just has a difficult time with, because sometimes you just can't go full aggro and full destruction on a certain Digimon, because your opponent would actually reap the benefits. So like something like Chaosmon Valdararm, for example, on deletion, they gain 3 memory. This would generally end our turn if we were to attack over it or deal with it with something like Gaia Force, where they would actually gain. Gaia Force would technically cost us 11 for all intents and purposes, which we don't really want to do. So Blitz Greymon instead allows us to de-digivolve our opponent's Digimon by 2, which outs it in a different way. This can also out things like Craniumon in black, for example, which is another Digimon that red has a difficult time dealing with. Or it just kind of can disrupt your opponent's stack, because if you have like a War Greymon now and it goes down to a champion, just something like that, it just helps us gain a little bit of tempo and kind of recoup some time that we might have lost by our opponent kind of getting up into a big stack. And because its name is also Greymon, we can reap the benefits from Marcus, and we can also reap the benefits from this Agumon as well. And this Blitz Greymon also has piercing, so if we do end up getting it into a big number, we can actually run it over into our opponent's Digimon, and depending on how we built our stack with our extra scaredy attacks, this Blitz Greymon can actually do a lot of damage on its own. And then rounding out the deck list, we've got 2 copies of Heir of Dragons. This is, for those familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh!, spot agreed, you get to draw 2. So red has a very difficult time in terms of draw power and just sheer consistency, which is why I want to max out on the hybrid engine and kind of give us a bit more consistency in that respect, so we can help find some pieces that we don't necessarily have like direct draw power access into. But with Heir of Dragons, it's a pot of greed that also acts as a form of removal, because we have a Greymon or a Drummon Digimon in play. We can destroy something with 4,000 or less. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 Greymons in the deck. In terms of Drummons, I think it's just Core Drummon. Oh, we have Voltramon as well. So, you know, it's just... that effect isn't going to come up as often, but it's the draw 2 that's very powerful, because it helps us dig a little bit deeper. If you get the added destruction bonus, then great. But yeah, I like the idea of having a bit more consistency in terms of draw power in this deck, and it does trigger insecurity, so we can actually get free cards on our opponent's turn when they attack us. And then just 2 copies of Gaia Force, because we need that extra little bit of removal. We're not playing any copies of Omnimon in this deck, because we're not really focused on what our opponent's doing. We're just kind of focused on kind of swinging for their face. And if our opponent does end up building up a threat, that's what we have our kind of small removal package here to kind of deal with as necessary. So yeah, that has been episode 2 of our Rainbow series, where we've talked about the color red, and this is the Red ShineGreymon list coming out of BT4. So if you guys liked it, like the video, and if you guys have any comments or questions or suggestions, let me know. If you think I should have done something differently, is there anything you would have done differently? Leave a comment below. And if you like what we do here at the Overground, please consider subscribing and help us reach our next milestone of 400 subscribers. All right, I have been Mike, aka Sanaku, once again. Thanks a lot for watching the video, guys. We'll see you in the next one.